CR 2014-149887-001. Let the record reflect the presence of counsel and the defendant. The jury is not present. The witness is on the witness stand. Is there anything we need to address before we continue with cross?
No, thank you.
No, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring in the jury, please.
All rise for the jury.
Please be seated. Mr. Lorenz, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
I have just a handful of questions for you. I could skip around a little bit. If my question isn't clear, just tell me. Have you reviewed your transcript, the transcript of the interview you did October 8th of 2014?
Partially.
Okay. So you arrive at the Knight's Inn, and I believe you testified that Trooper Casey's takedown lights were on.
Correct.
Could it have been his floodlights?
Yes, it could have.
Okay. And you had your floodlights on too?
Yes.
And I believe you said that those are some bright lights.
Yes.
But you still couldn't see inside the car.
That's correct.
And you weren't on the driver's side of the car, you were primarily on the passenger side of the car.
That's correct.
Did you at some point, I know you put the flashlight against that back passenger window, did you at any point try and get that back window to go down?
No, I didn't.
No time?
No, sir, that's not why.
Just didn't?
When another officer is conducting a traffic stop and they're having subjects that are uncooperative, you don't want to interrupt that officer to ask him to have them roll down the windows.
Gotcha. You heard a gunshot come from the Sable.
That's correct.
And that kind of damaged your hearing, at least temporarily, correct?
Correct.
Could you in any way, shape, or form describe that as a swish or a whoosh, the sound?
Negative.
It was loud.
It was a loud bang.
Do you know about how long after you heard that shot that the Sable took off and went around the building?
In my opinion, it appeared to be a couple seconds.
Do you know if the car was running, if that Sable was running when you were standing on the passenger side of it?
I cannot remember if it was on or off.
And I believe I'm sorry.
I didn't say anything.
And I believe your testimony was that Trooper Casey was about 1 foot away from the occupant on the back driver's side, the back passenger on the driver's side.
Correct. That from my perspective, looking across the hood, it appeared that he was about 1 foot away.
And then I think you testified that he may have stepped a little closer right before being shot. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So that happens, the Sable takes off, and then after a period of time, you see it come back around the Knight's Inn.
Correct.
Do you remember a point when that Sable slowed to a point where you thought it was going to stop?
Do I remember that moment? Yes.
Yeah. And then, in fact, you thought it was going to stop, correct? And that's as it was getting back close to you, correct?
Correct.
And were 3 or 4 shots then fired from that car when it appeared to almost stop?
I don't remember the exact number. I would estimate 3 to 4.
If it's in your transcript, did you agree that you recall about 3 or 4 shots?
Correct. This is 5 years ago, so I don't remember exactly what the transcript says.
I understand. Would you like to take a peek at it?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, just want to make sure. In fact, when the Sable came back around and started slowing and you thought it was going to stop, you sensed trouble, correct?
There could be no other conclusion.
Okay. And you didn't see the occupants at that point in time?
I could never see the occupants.
Gotcha. After Trooper Casey was shot and the Sable started taking off, I believe your testimony was that you focused your fire, your shots, on the back left or back driver's side of that car, correct?
That's correct.
Could you estimate how many rounds you fired at that point?
Are we talking the totality or just?
No, right there, just as it's after the shooting and it's taking off, when it's in
Somewhere
front.
between 3 to 5.
And then you testified that it hit the canopy that we saw in those pictures.
It didn't hit it, it drove underneath it.
Okay, and that's why you lost sight of it,
Correct.
but it never struck it.
I did not shoot the canopy, no.
If I could have just a minute, Judge?
You may.
Just a couple of more questions, sir. The first shot you saw muzzle flash, correct?
Correct.
And the shots that followed, I believe you said you saw smoke.
Yes.
Did you see the firearm or a hand outside of the sable?
No, I did not.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Ms. Dahl, redirect.
You're familiar with firearms, correct?
Yes.
Can you explain why you didn't see a muzzle flash from the rear driver's side during the second volley when you were being shot at?
For me to have not been able to see the muzzle blast, I mean, more than likely the weapon was being pointed in a downward angle, which meant the vehicle was taking the muzzle blast, which is why I was only seeing the smoke remnant after the shot was being fired.
Is it possible, from what you saw, that the shooter had the arm out of the vehicle, shooting toward you, and it was going potentially into the roof of the vehicle or ricocheting off the top of the roof of the vehicle?
From my perspective, that's what I believed was happening at that moment.
Would that explain why there was no muzzle flash?
Yes.
Why would you not interrupt the interaction that Trooper Casey was having with the occupants of the vehicle?
Officer safety, when the primary officer is interacting, like I said, with subjects that are not being compliant, and my version of not compliant is not providing their true identification, you don't want to interrupt them for their own safety. My interrupting the primary officer might cause him to lose focus. Not speaking about this traffic stop specifically, but it could lead to an officer getting hurt. So even though I was highly concerned with the fact that I could not see inside that window, that does not supersede the safety of the officer who's conducting the traffic stop and interacting with an occupant.
So he's the shot caller, correct?
In a sense, yes.
Because he can see who's inside the vehicle,
Correct.
and he's got a sense of what the demeanor may be, right?
Correct.
When you shot back at the Mercury Sable, after Officer Casey went down, the first time, I'm going to call it, were you and Alfano shooting essentially from west toward southeast?
To clarify that better, actually, Alfano was shooting in a general south direction because he was in line with Trooper Casey, which follows the line the vehicle used. By me standing on the other side of the vehicle and retreating towards my vehicle, I was shooting more in a south to east direction.
And so would that be toward the rear passenger, I'm sorry, you were shooting toward the rear driver's side door, right? Where that person was?
Correct. Since I could not see who the shooter was, but I could only attest to where I saw that shot come from, which was the person sitting behind the rear, in the rear seat behind the driver, and I knew there was 5 occupants in the vehicle. I could only prove shots were coming from that side of the vehicle, so that's where all my shots were being directed at.
You didn't just hear a gunshot when Officer Casey was shot, correct?
Correct.
You saw a muzzle flash, correct?
A muzzle flash, and I heard the loud bang, usually associated with a higher caliber weapon.
Would a .357 Magnum be the type of, would that be a high caliber weapon?
I would consider it a high caliber weapon.
Is that a handgun?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Thank you. I see we have at least one juror question. If there are any additional juror questions, if you could push or pass those forward at this time. Counsel, please approach. Officer, as you're aware, in the state of Arizona, if there are questions from the jury, they come through the judge. If Cruz could not see into the vehicle, how could he see Officer Casey's hand and the notepad from the other side of the vehicle?
I believe if my testimony was correct, I knew he was holding the notepad in his left hand, and I said I saw it go down in a motion consistent with him about to write something. I could not actually see the notepad. It's just after years of doing this job, if you see officers on the side of the road, their hands up are here. So when you see this motion go down, that's consistent with somebody that's about to write on a notepad. But no, I could not see the actual notepad when the shooting started.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Ms. Dahl?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up, Mr. Lorenz?
No, Your Honor.
All right. There are no further juror questions. That does conclude your testimony. You are excused. Thank you very much for coming in. Ms. Dahl, would the state like to call its next witness?
Yes, the state calls Mike Alfano to the stand, Your Honor.
Mr. Alfano, if you could please come forward and be sworn in by the clerk.
Hello. Can you please state and spell your first and your last name? Thank you. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
If you could go around. I'll ask you to do the same thing I did the last witness. That bar is a mic. Just make sure that it's capturing your voice. Thank you. Ms. Dahl, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Alfano, could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
My name is Michael Alfano.
Mr. Alfano, were you one of the officers that was shot at on October 8th of 2014?
Yes.
Before we talk about that night, let's talk about first you. Tell us about your professional background.
I became employed with Highway Patrol, Arizona Highway Patrol in 2008.
But before
Prior
then,
to that, prior to Highway Patrol, I did a little social work as a background. I get a criminal justice degree in 2003, and then I became employed with Highway Patrol in 2008. Around November, I graduated the academy. I don't remember the specific date. November 08.
so in November of 2008, were you hired to be what we commonly refer to as a trooper?
Yeah.
And what essentially was your first job assignment as a trooper in 2008?
So similar to what Ray laid out, you do the academy for 15 to 20 weeks. Then we have the 10-week Arizona Highway Patrol Academy. After that, in 2009, I began field training, which was an 8-week program at that time. My first assignment was in District 4, Area 6, Gila Bend, which is in Maricopa County. And I covered Interstate 8 and State Route 85 down there.
What was your assignment in October of 2014, sir?
I was on the Metro Central squad with Trooper Casey and Trooper Cruz. And we covered 17, a portion of 10, 51, and a portion of the northern part of the 101, the east-west section.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What is DPS? Well, every law enforcement officer that is certified by POST, which is
Yes.
Police Officers Standards Board, they have arrest and authority in the entire state of Arizona, correct?
Correct.
However, are there certain jurisdictions that are set forth to maintain a sense of order and responsibility within the agencies?
You mean area boundaries that we were
Yes.
assigned to? Yes, that's the way they had it set up,
So tell
yes.
us what DPS covers,
The whole-
generally.
The whole state, the highway systems, portions of the state that don't have local sheriffs that can patrol those specific areas.
So it's a very broad jurisdiction, right?
Yes.
But within the Phoenix metro area, what is the metro area that you, Trooper Cruz and Trooper Casey were covering on the night of October of 2014?
Highway systems, we would always provide backup for any calls from Phoenix PD if necessary, or any of the other jurisdictions that fell within our area.
What were you doing at approximately 3 a.m. on October 8th of 2014?
I was patrolling.
Were you riding alone?
Yes.
And you were in a marked unit,
Yes.
wearing your uniform?
Yes.
Tell us about the call that drew you to where Officer Casey was conducting the traffic stop.
So he put out a call on car to car asking for somebody to come down. I happened to be the only person out that day because most of the squad was doing paperwork. I had already finished mine for the night, so I decided to go back out. And I was going down to where Officer Casey or Trooper Casey had made this stop at the Knights Inn there.
When you got there, what vehicle did you see first? Had been stopped?
Trooper Cruz had already gotten onto the scene. By that point, I arrived shortly after him. So there were two cars that were behind the Kansas-plated Mercury Sable. And then I pulled in behind the two of them.
Did you have your lights on?
No.
And what did you do once you got out of your
I
vehicle?
approached the passenger side of Trooper Casey's car to ask him to kind of hear what was going on with the stop.
And was he sharing that he was gathering information from the occupants of the vehicle?
Yes.
What did you do then?
I just waited for him to reapproach the vehicle when we were going to reapproach, when the rear driver passenger's name wasn't coming up in the system.
Where did you stand?
When we reapproached,
Yes.
I was standing by the rear tail light of the vehicle, just to my left of the C-pillar of the vehicle.
And is the C-pillar what has been previously described by
Yes.
Mr. Cruz?
Yes.
Could you see into the Mercury Sable?
No.
Why couldn't you?
The window tint was dark.
What about the angle from where you were standing?
I couldn't see in. I was standing off to the C-pillar, so I couldn't even really see into the window that was rolled down.
And at that point, from your vantage point, what were you looking at and where was your attention drawn?
I was looking in the vehicle. I was kind of looking around the parking lot a little bit because of the area we were in, just an officer safety thing, making sure nobody came up on our traffic stop. And I was listening to the conversation.
Is the Knights Inn known as often a high crime location?
Yes.
What about Jaguars?
Yeah. Yes.
Was it of concern to you to keep also situational awareness as it relates to people, as you said, potentially walking out?
Correct.
Did you hear what Trooper Casey was saying? Was he trying to gather the information and the identities of those who were within the vehicle?
Yes. He asked the passenger behind the driver. He wasn't coming up. What's your name? And then he asked him for his social security number.
And at that point, what happened?
So the passenger started to say his social security number. Casey put his head down and started writing in his notebook, and then that's when I heard shots fired.
Did you see anything?
No, I just heard I heard gunshots.
Were you not looking at that area of the vehicle?
I can't specifically remember where I was looking at that point in time, but I know I heard a gunshot.
What did you see next?
Casey went down on the ground and I just reacted. I pulled my weapon and I started firing rounds at the vehicle.
Where did you start shooting at?
The back window of the vehicle.
Were you shooting at a particular area of the vehicle?
I don't specifically remember, but I was shooting at the back window.
What did the vehicle do? Or where did the vehicle go is a better question.
It happened so fast. I remember the vehicle speeding off. It seemed like instantaneously after the shooting began. And then the vehicle drove southbound towards the hotel, so the awning area.
What did you do at that point in time?
As soon as the vehicle kind of got out of my, I don't want to say vantage point, I stopped shooting. I remember being back next to Cruz's car. Cruz put out the information over the radio. I remember doing a magazine exchange.
What is that?
I took the magazine that was currently in my weapon. I removed it from the weapon like I had been trained, and I put a full magazine back in the weapon.
And why are you typically trained to do a magazine exchange?
I mean, it's just a training thing. When you fire rounds of ammunition, you always want a full magazine in the weapon. And at that point in time, there was a lull. So when Cruz was doing the radio traffic, that's when I decided to put a new full magazine in the weapon.
What happened next?
Cruz put out the traffic, and then I remember him saying to me that we have to go get Casey. We came back out from the side of his car. We were in the middle of the parking lot at this point in time. I remember screeching tires, and the same vehicle that had just driven off came back around the building and was what sounded like gunfire firing rounds at us.
Could you see if the passenger side, front and rear windows were up or down on the car?
I don't remember.
What did you do? Were there shots fired coming from the vehicle when it came around the second time?
Yes.
Were they coming from one area of the vehicle?
I don't remember.
Would it be fair to say that even when you did the walkthrough with investigators after this was such a fast, fluid event, you couldn't remember a lot of the details from when the shooting started?
Correct.
And have you learned since then that that is not uncommon for those who are involved in these types of incidents?
Right.
What did you do when the car came back around the second time and there were shots toward you and Trooper Cruz and Trooper Casey?
I returned fire, and I immediately started retreating to cover. I was trying to get behind one of the squad cars that we had parked there.
What happened next?
I ended up behind cover. Cruz put out over the radio that Trooper Casey was down and that they had driven around the building again. And I don't know, I just remember reapproaching him, and then we dragged him off behind cover to attend to him and give him first aid.
Were you helping to give first aid to Trooper Casey?
Yeah, and I think I was covering us just to make sure that there wasn't any threat. And it just gets blurry from there. Did what you were supposed to do, try to do first aid, and Trooper Cruz was putting out the information over the radio.
At that point, Trooper Cruz had taken control of the situation.
Yeah, because generally you don't want people talking over each other on the radio, so since he had already started with the traffic on the air, I'm not going to talk over him.
Right.
Yeah.
And were Phoenix police units responding, officers?
From what I remember, they did arrive on scene, as well as some of the other guys on my squad.
You've tried to remember the specific details and events of that night, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, that night when you did your walkthrough with Detective Butcher, you shared as much that you could within a few hours, right?
Yes, correct.
Would it be fair to say that once there was a shot and Trooper Casey went down, your memory became blurred?
Yeah, I mean, it was fight or flight at that point, and, you know, you just try to get everyone safe, and, yeah, there's a lot of things that are blurry.
And you've retired from law enforcement since this incident, correct?
Yeah.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as exhibit number 114. You talked about how you and Trooper Cruz pulled together, or body drag, to use his words, Trooper Casey to save his life, right?
Yes.
I'm going to show you exhibit 114. I apologize. You could look very closely, and it'll be popping up in a minute, at this photo. You can see it from there, and if you can't, come look down here. And in exhibit 114, does it appear that there are body drag marks from where, next to where the flashlight is, over to where behind
Yes.
Trooper Cruz's
Yeah.
personal items were cut off of him?
Yes.
Would that be where you and he had pulled him together?
Yes.
Did you see the occupants of the vehicle?
No.
And you said you heard the shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was there more than one shot
I don't remember.
initially? And when the blue Sable came back around the second time, the shots were coming from that car toward you and the other two officers?
Yes.
And is that when you returned fire?
Yeah.
Were you scared that night?
Yes.
What did you think could have happened?
I mean, that Casey was gonna die and that we could potentially also have the same fate.
May I have one moment?
You may.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Lorenz, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
So I believe you testified that after that shot, the vehicle took off. I think your words were instantaneously or immediately.
That's what I remember, yeah.
Sure. And the only person that you saw Trooper Casey talking with was that backseat driver passenger,
Yeah.
correct? Was there any mistaking the sound you heard for a gunshot? Could it have been something else?
No, sounded like a gunshot to me. I know what a gunshot sounds like.
Gotcha. So it was immediately identifiable as a gunshot.
To me, yes.
You had no face-to-face contact with the occupants of the Sable, correct?
Correct.
And I believe you testified, and I may have said this in your statement, when they talked to you October 8th of 2014, that you shot at the back window.
Yes.
And then when it came back around, you're firing at the car,
Yes.
correct? Could you estimate about how many rounds you fired? Not going to hold you to it.
In total,
Yeah, total.
I think it was 12.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You know exactly how many shots you fired in both incidents with the car, correct?
In total, yeah.
And you know that based because there is what's called a gun exchange after, firearm exchange after an incident like this, right?
Yes.
And tell us what happens in that very briefly.
When I reloaded the weapon?
No, I'm talking about afterwards when there's an investigation and you meet with investigators and you talk about what happened and then you hand over your firearm so there can be an inspection.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
They take your weapon from you, and we did an inventory count of how many rounds I had. We carried 3 magazines on duty, and they subtracted the total number that I had left from the amount you start the shift with.
So then you know exactly how many rounds were fired, right?
Yes.
But you can't tell based off an independent memory how many rounds you fired in that scenario, can you?
No.
How fast did this happen, Trooper Alfano?
It seemed like a minute to me from the first exchange to when they drove back around the building.
And we know, based upon the radio, that at least there's 32 seconds between the calling out of 998 and Trooper Cruz indicating that they came back around, right?
Yes.
But in that moment, what were you feeling as it related to time?
Everything was sped up. It just seemed fast, like an instant, like I said.
Where was your focus?
Was trying to stop the threat, and after the threat drove off the first time, to render first aid to Trooper Casey.
We've heard about what's been called an adrenaline dump in situations like this. What were you going through after this?
It's just, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Like I said, fight or flight. It was, you know, in danger, immediate danger, and then you just, I don't know, jittery, I guess, would be the word I would use.
What word?
Jittery.
Jittery? I had nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. I see that there's at least one juror question. If you have any others, please pass them forward. Counsel, please approach. Officer Alfano, how many shots were fired from the vehicle during the first volley when the officer was shot?
I don't know.
Next question. On the second volley, did you see or hear anything other than gunfire, like bullet impacts or bullets whizzing near you?
No, I just heard gunfire.
Next question. On the second volley after the car returned, was it driving south on the frontage road after exiting the hotel area?
Yes, southbound.
Any follow-up, Ms. Dahl?
Yes, are you aware that there were projectiles that were found in the vehicles, in the buildings behind where you, Trooper Casey and Trooper Cruz were? Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as Exhibit 92. Could you show us on here, sir? Okay. Technology. If you push your finger, put your finger, I believe on the top right button,
It's on.
everything, click on that. Now, on your screen in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
could you circle where the Sable was during the car stop, the initial car stop?
Yeah, it would have been in that area.
Okay. Now, when it took off, what direction of travel did it go? Where did that vehicle go?
So it went southbound, underneath the awning there.
So when it's southbound underneath the awning, you speak up.
Yeah, southbound underneath the awning.
And at that point, you're rendering aid to Trooper Casey, correct?
Yes.
After it went under the awning and you were no longer shooting, right?
Yeah. So we returned fire initially to the vehicle. The vehicle takes off. We were behind Trooper Cruz's car, which is...
Is it the vehicle to the right
Yeah, we were...
of Trooper Casey's?
Yeah, we
It's
would
right
have been
behind
over
the car?
here at that point in time. That's when I did my magazine exchange. Trooper Cruz was putting out the info on the radio, and then that's when we reapproached after we did all that. And we were probably in this vicinity when the vehicle came back around and fired upon us again.
Well, you did move Trooper Casey, correct? Before the vehicle came back around?
That I don't remember.
And then you said the vehicle came back around when you were next to Trooper Casey, right?
Yes.
Where did you see that vehicle coming from?
Initially, similar to Cruz, I thought it was coming from over here by Jaguars, I was told after the fact that it came out here, and then I just remember it spinning through onto the frontage here, going southbound, and I heard the tires screeching and then gunfire, and that's when I returned fire and started running to get behind cover.
So you were only as far away as that little grass berm between where the vehicle was when they came by you and where you were rendering aid to Trooper Casey, is that right?
Yes.
So how many feet would you estimate that little grass berm is?
I mean, I don't know, 3 feet, give or take.
I'll put exhibit 74. We'll clear it out. Thank you. Exhibit 74 up on the Elmo. Could it be a little more than 3 feet?
The grass berm?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's probably more than 3 feet.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Lorenz, any follow-up?
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, I would like to show you Exhibit 92 on the Almo. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Can you show us, if that's enough of the picture, the path of the sable as it came back around and left the property? Just the last maybe 20 feet of what it did?
Yeah, it entered on the roadway here and then just came this way.
And left.
And then left, yeah. But they were firing rounds at us.
Right. So, are you on, as we look at this picture on the big screen, are you to the left of the red line or the right of the red line?
I would have been, if I'm facing it, if I'm looking at it the way I'm looking at it right now,
Just-
I would be to the left of the red line.
And the car is the red line or somewhere in there, correct?
Yeah, so let's just, yes. On the roadway is the car. That other line, I don't know how that red line got on there. I did not mean to draw
The
that.
squiggle?
The squiggle as well as the straight 90-degree portion that's intersecting the building here. I did not mean to draw that.
So, what path or what route off that property did the Sable take to hit the frontage road? And if you want to stand up with the picture behind you, that's fine. And if you need me to move this picture, I'll do that too.
So it would have exited this driveway right here,
Gotcha.
come back on the road, and continue southbound on the frontage.
And then you're to the south of that, the straight line that happens to appear on that picture.
Yeah, we would have been over here.
So the passenger side of the car is what's exposed to your gunfire,
Yes,
not the driver's side.
correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Dahl, any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Seeing no additional juror questions, that does conclude your testimony. You are excused. Thank you very much. Would the state like to call its next witness?
Yes, Judge, the state will call Officer Eric Gunnels.
To the jurors, at any point while we are getting witnesses, if you want to stand up and take your own stretch break, you are more than welcome to. You're not expected to sit there the whole time. Stretch, take your time, and then once the juror takes the witness takes the witness stand, you can sit back down. Officer, if you could please come forward and be sworn in by the clerk. Right here. Thank you.
Hello. Can you please state and spell your first and your last name?
Eric, E-R-A-C, last name Gunnels, G-U-N-N-E-L-S.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please take a seat in the witness stand. I'll tell you the same thing I've told the other witnesses. That black bar in front of you is the microphone. Please make sure that you speak into it so that the jurors can hear you. Thank you.
Detective, could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Pardon me. Yes, my name is Eric Gunnels, police officer with the Phoenix Police Department.
How long have you worked at the City of Phoenix Police Department?
Approximately 13 years.
What's your current assignment, sir?
Currently, I'm assigned to the Community Relations Bureau. I'm a crisis intervention detective and collateral duty for our negotiations team.
Let's talk about the crisis team. What's your job description there? What do you do?
My main function is to contact individuals, reference mental and behavioral health that are under petition, or people that are maybe having suicidal ideations, and contacting them and providing them care, transport.
And what does it mean to be a negotiator?
I'm a collateral duty negotiator, so part of our tactical team, there's a tactical portion and then the negotiation side. So we work with them, and then on any scene we will come out, we'll be the communicator with whoever the individual is that, or situation that we're working, that will negotiate to hopefully have a resolution of them exiting.
I want to turn your attention to October 8th of 2014, Detective. What was your job assignment back then?
At that time, I was assigned to patrol. I was currently on, it was 91 King out of our Cactus Park precinct.
Well, that's a lot of cop talk, so tell us, were you a patrol officer in a particular area of the city?
Yeah, it was patrol, working third shift overnight, and it was the southern part of the Cactus Park precinct.
Thank you, sir. Would that encompass the area of the Knights Inn?
It was actually just, technically our boundary ended right at, it would be Indian School, which is just 1 mile north, was our, I guess, our boundary, but we're just a little bit north.
Were you riding alone in your vehicle?
Yes, that night I was, yeah.
And as a patrol officer for the City of Phoenix, are you in a marked vehicle
Yes, ma'am.
and a uniform?
Yes.
Did you respond to a radio call regarding a traffic stop that had gone bad at around 3:06 a.m.?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Tell us what you did when you heard the radio call.
I was, at the time of hearing they put it out kind of as an all call over the radio frequency. I was a little bit north at, I believe at the time it was a Motel 6, pretty much off of the access road, just north of Indian School. Was there, reference another call, the all call came out. Hearing the location, it was just south of us along the access road. So immediately exited out of there, continued southbound down the access road, pardon me, going with lights and sirens, trying to get there as quickly as we could. Do you want me to explain what I saw when I got there?
Tell us what you saw when you got there.
Okay. Upon arrival, pulling up on the access road, I observed a DPS vehicle that was parked in kind of the facing southbound in the parking lot of the Knights Inn. I observed another DPS vehicle parked be just to the west of it, a little bit further south. And there was a lot of, the air was extremely hazy. Once I exited, I could smell the gunpowder, heavy smell of gunpowder. And as I looked over, I observed a DPS officer who was laying on the ground. The bottoms of his boots were facing me, they were facing up, so his head was further south of me.
Was there anyone around him?
There, I believe there were one, or maybe there were two other DPS officers next to him. I wholeheartedly admit that I had a lot of tunnel vision on that. But I know that there was at least one other and he was standing. The other thing that I remember, there was an officer, from the best of my recollection, who was going southbound, discharging his weapon at a vehicle that I just saw some taillights. All I saw were taillights heading south down the access road. Immediately ran over to the officer who was down on the ground. When I got up to him,
What was his, when you got to the officer that was down, what did you see?
right when I walked up to him, he, as I said, such a weird detail, but his bottom of his boots were, to me, they were facing up. His toes were up. When I got over to him, I could immediately see that his mouth was filled with blood, and he was, I guess you would say, gargling or choking. Not a doctor, but that's what it sounded like. So I knelt down immediately next to him, and he was kind of had his hands up, just kind of moving his hands in a motion.
Could you talk, was he speaking?
At that exact moment, he was kind of wanting to say something, but it was kind of garbly.
What did you do?
So I grabbed him by the vest and just kind of by his vest and his shoulder and kind of leaned him to the side to help get the blood out of his mouth. Not sure if that would help clear out his airway or what, but had him move off to the, lean to the side, kind of helped him move over and told him to spit. He did that, and then I don't know I don't know word for word what he said.
What do you remember?
I know that he was asking, am I okay? Is it okay? Am I okay? And his hands were still just kind of in weird motions. At that point, I asked, I kind of just talked back to him and said, you're okay. We're here. You're all right. You're doing okay. Have you been hit anywhere else? And again, he would kind of, it was a lot of blood. And to me, I thought that I saw the round. I don't know if it was the round or not, but maybe it was jawbone, but I could see in there and it would start filling up with blood quickly. So I lifted him back up again and had him spit again, put him back down. And then I remember kind of looking up to one of the other officers that were standing off to the side. I was asking, what is his name?
What was the response?
I don't remember. I apologize.
How were you engaging with them?
I just was talking to him, just telling him that it was okay. That it was okay. He was okay.
Was he having a hard time breathing?
He was.
How quickly did fire arrive?
They got there quickly. I mean, it felt like forever.
In that moment, let me ask you this. You weren't involved in the shooting, were you?
No.
What was your sense of time as you're dealing with this traumatic situation?
Felt like forever.
Did you have a sense of time?
Not really, no. I didn't. It felt like forever that he was sitting there trying to ask if he was okay, and I was trying to tell him that he was okay. Trying to keep him calm, keep him focused on me. I know that the other officer, when I asked his name, he knelt down and was talking with them. He might have been doing something else. I know that I probably had some tunnel vision going.
Based upon your training and experience, and you work with SWAT, don't you?
Yes.
You work with high crisis situations, is that correct?
Yes.
Is it common, based upon your training and experience in those areas, for those involved in traumatic experiences to not remember details?
Yes.
Is it common for there to be a loss of time?
I believe that can be a very normal thing, yes.
Is it common to have tunnel vision?
Yes.
What did you do next?
At that point, I'd asked him a couple of times if he had been hit again. Again, just kind of reassuring him that he was okay. At that point, I started taking off his vest to check to see if he had any other injuries or any other wounds, and then his belt as well. I know that was a little bit of a struggle trying to get the keepers off. And
Well, tell us why it was a little bit different or a bit of a struggle with the belt.
well, most of our belts will wear, like any kind of pant belt goes to the front. There's some belts that people will wear that the fastener goes onto the back, just because they like more of their tools of the trade up in the front. He was one of those that had it to the back, so when we took off the keepers, it was trying to get the belt off, but again, trying to struggle to find how to unlatch the belt. And then again, get the vest off to check for any other injuries.
What else did you do to save his life?
I don't know if I could, I don't know if I could take credit for saving his life. I think
Did you try to?
I was trying, I mean, absolutely, I was trying to. I mean, it's a person laying there. Kept lifting him and moving him to the side to keep his airway clean. I think that was the biggest thing, is that I know I helped lift him off to the side at least 3, maybe more times. I don't know exactly to give an exact number, but I know for sure it was at least 3. Because like I said, that wound was filling up pretty quick. And so he would kind of ask some questions. I don't know exactly what it was. But get him moved to the side for him to be able to clear out the airway, and then get him sat back down. And then once checking him for any other injuries, and I couldn't find any at that point. And then I do remember fire, I know this doesn't sound bad, but finally showing up is how it felt, that they finally arrived. And once they got there, they were really quick about getting over to us and getting him put onto the gurney and getting him on the seat.
I have no other questions at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
I have no cross-examination, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that there's at least one juror question. Counsel, please approach. Officer, when you arrived, was the officer that was down still by the grass, or had he already been moved behind the vehicle for cover?
Whenever I arrived, he had already been moved over to the vehicle, I guess for, what was it, for cover? Is that?
The question does read, behind the vehicle for cover.
Okay. I just know that I don't know what the reasoning was or why he was there, but I could tell you that upon my arrival, he was moved over onto the asphalt just to the west of the furthest west vehicle. There was not in the grass area. He had already been moved over to the passenger side of the furthest west vehicle.
Any follow-up, Ms. Dahl?
Yes. I'm going to show you what's been admitted as Exhibit 89. Could you show us on this exhibit, it's there, where you found the officer who'd been wounded?
I can describe it as from us looking at the photos, so the farthest, sorry. Oh.
You hit that little button on the top right and then circle it.
Oh. Top right. Right there, is that a circle?
Yeah, you don't intend to have the line, is that right?
No. I didn't do the line on purpose. Where the circle is where I ended up locating.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Lorenz, any follow-up?
Very briefly, Judge. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Looking at that picture, are we facing north?
From,
Right here, is that kind of northerly direction?
it would be a northernly direction, maybe even a little bit northwest.
Yeah.
But
So a little southeast, then behind us? Right, north, kind of west, southeast?
Yes.
So do you know from this picture where the road is that someone would use to exit that property and go out to the frontage road? Would it be north of the state police vehicles?
To the best of my recollection, if I remember correctly, there's actually an entrance that would be from that farthest right DPS vehicle. There's an entrance right there. And then there's also an entrance would be coming back to this side where that red curb. There's another exit right there. That little green grass area is kind of like a half circle, I guess you would say, or.
So there's an entrance to the north of those state police vehicles. Entrance, exit.
I believe so, if I remember correctly.
Thank you. That's all I have, Joe.
Ms. Dahl, any follow-up?
Thank you. Show you what's been admitted as exhibit number 92. Are we looking at an aerial view of the night center?
Yes.
And I'm going to use my pen, point in the middle, about 2 inches up for the record. Is this an entrance into the night's inn? And then there's another exit over here, just north of, I'm going to call it check-in office.
Yeah.
I'll show you what's been admitted as exhibit number 80. Is that what we just described to the jurors?
Yes, ma'am.
I have no further questions, but at this time.
Thank you. There's at least one juror question. Counsel, please approach. Sir, can you please confirm, when you arrived, did you state that they were still firing?
They being when I arrived along with another officer who was in a separate patrol vehicle, there was a DPS officer who was going southbound down the access road, who I still remember a couple of shots being fired from his, I believe that it was his rifle, but I remember hearing a couple of pops, and then a lot of my focus got fixated on seeing what I knew to be an officer laying on the ground in the area that I described earlier that was to the right of the DPS vehicle.
So it is correct to say that you stated that when you arrived, Casey had already been moved, correct?
Yes, I believe so. I don't know what his original, place was. I can only tell you where he was once I arrived there. I don't know.
Thank you. Ms. Dahl?
Are you aware that there were some DPS officers who had arrived who were running to different areas to set up a perimeter?
I do know that other DPS officers were arriving on scene along with kind of the all-call to Phoenix, so.
And are you aware that, for example, one of them may have had a rifle or a long gun, as they referred to it after this second incident had occurred?
Yes.
Are you 100% confident that that individual was shooting as they were running toward the southbound area?
To be 100% confident, again, I know that I kind of got focused and hyper-focused on seeing the officer down. I believe that I had heard pops. I do know that I saw him running southbound down the access road because I know that the other officer that had arrived at the same time as I did was running after him. Part of that was to help the radio frequencies so that we weren't having to go from their frequency to dispatch to ours. And there's probably going to be a lot more Phoenix officers in that direct location, so he could have his frequency go directly to Phoenix units.
Now, you also had your radio, correct?
Yes.
And you were listening to that at the same time?
Our frequency, yes.
Was that also a very fast-moving fluid situation?
Extremely, yeah. It was multiple channels. Part of the issue is, as I said before, I worked out of the Cactus Park precinct in the southern border, and our area ended at Indian School. The Knights Inn is just north of McDowell, which then falls into the Maryville area, and they have a separate frequency and a separate dispatcher. And then the I-17 runs north and south, and on the east side of that goes into, I believe it would have been our Desert Horizon precinct, and even another precinct, so a lot of multiple
So the Knights Inn,
dispatchers.
essentially, if it was a pie, the city, you had at the center of the pie 4 different pieces involving 4 different precincts that could respond to that location, correct?
Yeah, approximately 3 or 4. I'd have to look to see exactly, but right on the border, it'd be 3 or 4 different areas.
And then you had DPS that run the I-17, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So was it a chaotic situation over the airwaves?
Extremely.
Nothing further.
Mr. Lorenz, any follow-up?
Just briefly, Judge. Sir, I'm back. Not to belabor anything, I just want to make sure that my mind's eye understands your testimony. Your testimony was that when you arrived, you recall seeing a state trooper and hustling down the frontage road, firing a rifle.
I believe him to be firing a rifle. As I said, from a lot of my fixation was, I remember there being cloudy. It seemed extremely cloudy. When I opened up the door, I then could kind of assimilate and figured out that it was gunpowder still in the air, a heavy amount of it. My focus was at the boots that were laying down next to the DPS vehicle. I remember out of the corner of my eye, as I said before, the officer who had arrived with me, Phoenix police officer, he appeared in my mind to be focused on chasing down the officer who was running southbound. So I kept my attention more on the boots. I don't know the reason why. That was just a direction that I went to, was to go to the boots.
So then going back to my question, did you see a DPS trooper running after a dark blue Mercury Sable and firing a rifle at it? Going down the south on the frontage road? That's just a yes or no.
Well, there's going to be a little bit more than yes or no.
Did you see someone firing? Did you see a trooper firing at a car on the frontage road heading southbound?
As I said before, from what I can remember, I believe that I was hearing a pop. A lot of my focus got fixated on the boots.
I'm just going from your testimony today.
Absolutely.
And when you arrive at the Knights Inn, how many troopers are around Trooper Casey? If you know.
As I said before, I believe that it was either 1 or 2. I do specifically remember at least 1 other trooper being around him, but there might have been another.
And then 1 trooper headed down the frontage road with a long gun with another trooper following behind him.
No, 1 trooper that I saw going down the frontage road with another Phoenix officer.
Gotcha. Okay. Second law enforcement officer, different department.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Ms. Dahl?
No follow-up.
All right. Seeing no additional questions from the jurors, that does conclude your testimony. You are excused. Thank you very much for coming in.
The state calls, I believe it's Sergeant now Labo to the stand.
Thank you. Please come forward and be sworn in by the clerk.
solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. That black bar is a microphone. If you could just make sure to speak into that so the jury can hear you, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Could the officer repeat his last name?
Labo,
You spell your last name, sir.
Leyba.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jurors? What do you do for a living?
My name is Trooper Cody Labo with Arizona Department of Public Safety. I'm currently assigned to our full-time SWAT team with the department. I've been with the department for 6 years. Three of those years, I was on patrol night shift here in Phoenix, and the last 3 I've been on our full-time SWAT team.
I want to turn your attention, sir, to October 8th of 2014 at approximately 3 a.m. Were you working that evening?
Yes.
Where were you at that time?
I was at one of our stations, main cross streets at 22nd Avenue in Cano, just east of I-17, Thomas area.
Who were you there with?
Prior to that, I was with Trooper Ray Cruz.
And what were you doing?
I was still fairly new at that time. I hadn't had a computer issued to me yet, so we were in the parking lot. I was finally getting one. So we were in the parking lot. He was showing me kind of how it worked, the ins and outs of all of it, just prior to that incident.
And at some point, shortly around that time, did Trooper Cruz indicate that he was going to back up Trooper Casey at a traffic stop?
Yes, so on our CAD system, you can check yourself out. If you're available, you'll be in the green, is what we called it at the time.
What is a CAD system?
CAD system is just a board that keeps track of everybody who's on duty, what they're doing, where they're at. At the time, Trooper Alfano was the only one in the green, meaning he was the only one available. So Trooper, what I remember, Trooper Casey saw that, asked, he got him on what we called car to car, meaning you can, on the radio channel, you can contact another trooper without notifying dispatch. So, you know, if you're working a scene, you don't have to bug dispatch with something. He asked him if he can stop out with him because he had multiple people in the vehicle. Myself and Trooper Ray Cruz heard that. We were gonna go, but Trooper, at the time I was new, so I had a lot of paperwork. He said,
Is it
stay.
fair to say they give the new guy paperwork?
What's that?
Is it fair to say they give the new guy paperwork?
It's just, you're the new guy, so you gotta learn the ways.
So you stayed, and more experience, I'm gonna put it that way, Trooper Ray Cruz, he left.
Yes.
What happened then?
I just went back in the office, catching up on paperwork. A couple minutes after that, you know, when you're working with somebody, you recognize their voice on the radio. I just, over the radio, you heard shots fired. At 998, 999, which, if you guys don't know, the radio code for that, 998 is officer involved shooting, 999 is like, officer needs immediate backup now. So of course, the first reaction is you just go running out of the office. I knew exactly where they were at. It was on the other side of the highway, not too far from where our office was at.
About how many miles away were you?
Maybe a mile, 2 miles.
What did you do?
Jumped in my department vehicle, code 3 lights and sirens, responded to the scene, cut across Grand Avenue, took a side street out to McDowell, and traveled wrong way up the southbound I-17 frontage road. While we were responding, Trooper Ray Cruz put out additional info that the vehicle had circled back around again and shot at them. So, you know, when you're responding to something like that, your adrenaline, everything is through the roof at that point, at least for me, because I was still so new. So you're trying to, A, you're trying to figure out exactly where they're at, B, you're trying to keep your composure, you know, because last thing you want to do is crash a vehicle while you're responding to something, because you're useless to something. you're useless to anybody at that point. So we go wrong way up the frontage road to the Knights Inn Hotel. It's it's our patrol area. We're pretty familiar with that area.
What did you do when you got there?
Immediately, due to the fact that there was additional info that the vehicle had circled back around, I deployed my department issued patrol rifle, just due to the fact that the scene was still unsecure.
When you say deployed, did you grab it?
Yes. I grabbed it, slung it over my shoulder.
And what did you do?
Kind of went running up to where Trooper Casey was. He was on the ground, just like a pool of blood. I noticed he had a gunshot into his face. Trooper Ray Cruz at the time with Trooper Alfano. Something like that. The scene was still pretty chaotic. I got there within 2 to 3 minutes of when the initial shots fired call came out.
What did you do when you were there with Cruz, Alfano, and Casey?
I kind of just seen security because obviously the scene was still insecure. I did what I could to help out with administering first aid.
Did you take one of your responsibilities to go, when you say scene security, what does that mean in that type of situation? What did you do?
Initially, I kind of just positioned myself in front of them, just in case. Again, the intel was that the vehicle had circled back around, shot again, so I wanted to make sure that I was ready if that was to happen a third time. While I was doing that, the other troopers on scene were administering first aid.
Were there other responding units?
Yes.
Were there other DPS officers coming?
Yes.
Were there other PPD or Phoenix Police Department officers arriving on scene?
Yes.
Did you at some point go further away from where Trooper Casey was on the ground getting medical aid as part of perimeter or scene security?
Yes.
Where did you go?
I believe,
I'm going to put Exhibit 92 up here, okay?
I believe, I don't recall if Trooper Casey had been transported to the hospital at that point, but myself, along with a Phoenix police officer, went inside the main lobby at the Knights Inn Motel and asked them if they had any type of surveillance camera that maybe had some, that may have, caught the footage of the incident, that we can gather some information, some intelligence on the vehicle and go from there.
Were there other DPS officers that were arriving to help?
Yes.
Did some of them have rifles?
I do not recall.
Let me show you what's, again, 92, admitted. Where did you go to initially when you got on scene?
Initially, I just kind of ran up to where Trooper Casey, Trooper Alfano, and Trooper Ray Cruz were at. See if I can help out with some type of, again, scene security, as well as see if I can help out with any type of first aid. Trooper Ray Cruz and Alfano were on top of it. They did what they could to help out until fire got there. Phoenix Fire Department to help with medical treatment and getting transported.
Did you see a blue car at any point, or had it already left that area when you arrived?
It had left prior to me arriving on
So you
scene.
didn't see a blue Sable there?
No.
How many units would you estimate were arriving on scene in the minutes after the 998 and the 999 came out over the radio?
Probably within the first several minutes, probably 10 between our department and Phoenix Police Department, probably 10 marked units.
I have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
I have no cross-examination, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any juror questions? I see no juror questions. Sir, that does conclude your testimony. Thank you very much for coming in. You are excused. Ms.
State
Dahl?
calls Detective Wallen to the stand, Your Honor.
Wallen?
Yeah, Wallin.
Thank you. Sir, if you could please come forward and be sworn in by the clerk.
Hello. Can you please state and spell your first and your last name?
Detective Cruz, C-H-R-S, Wallen, W-A-L-L-I-N.
Thank you. Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please be seated, sir.
Good afternoon, Detective Wallen. Could you introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello, I'm Detective Wallen, badge number 9176. Work for the Phoenix Police Department. I've been on about 12 years.
Were you a patrol officer back on October 8th of 2014 for the Phoenix Police Department?
Yes, I was.
Did you respond to a 998 or a 999 call from the night scene?
Yes.
And about what time was that, sir?
I was working overnights at the time. I know it was like the early morning hours. I don't remember the exact time.
When you arrived on scene at the night's end, what did you see?
I saw a DPS officer identifiable from his tan uniform, badges, and patches laying on the ground with blood coming out of his face.
Did you see other units from the Phoenix Police Department and DPS arriving?
I did.
Were you one of the first people to run up to where the injured officer was?
I was.
What did you see and do?
So immediately, I'm kind of aware that we need to secure a scene, but first, before we do that, I want to make sure that the officer is okay. Me, along with a few other officers, we started, seeing if he was able to communicate with us. He had made comments like that he had something in his mouth and he was having a hard time breathing, so we were just making sure he was okay and could talk to us and understand us and whatnot.
What did you do?
We made sure that the fire department was notified and was going to be en route. He was laying on his back at the time. We kind of rolled him off to the side to help him be able to get breath in, and his mouth was filling up with blood, and so he could spit out the blood and whatnot.
At this time, were there other responding officers from both DPS and PPD, some of whom may have had a rifle to set up a perimeter situation?
Yeah.
Once fire arrived and more officers were arriving, did you do something to maintain the integrity of the crime scene there?
I did. I requested from a supervisor to find me some crime scene tape. He did, and then I strung up crime scene tape around the scene.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as Exhibit 114. Is this the area that you helped to secure?
Yes.
Specifically, were you concerned about a particular area of that scene to make sure that it wasn't disrupted or tampered with in any way?
Right here, this flashlight was there and it was on, so that kind of indicated to me that that might be where something took place. And then the cars that were parked, that's pretty consistent with how you do a traffic stop. So when I started looking around that area, I saw some shell casings and some other items of evidence that would be pretty important to an investigation like this.
Do you do something with your index cards or FI cards, field cards, to mark, for example, spent shell casings when you come onto a scene like that before the detectives come?
Some people do. I don't recall doing that. I was more concerned about creating a perimeter just so people wouldn't walk through that scene.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as exhibit number 112. Give it clear up in the top right, sir. Is this an example of the crime scene tape that was being put up in the different areas, at least later in the investigation?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as exhibit 113. Are these some of the items that you had a concern about being disrupted or trampled on by EMT, fire, or responding officers?
Yes.
And did you try to ensure that that scene was not disrupted as quickly as possible?
Yes.
I have nothing further at this time.
Mr. Lorenz?
I have no questions, thank you.
Seeing no questions from the jurors, that does conclude your testimony. You are excused. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Ms. Dahl, would this be a good time to break for the evening?
Yes, thank you.
All right. The jurors of the admonition, please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. We will resume tomorrow morning at 10:30. Have a good evening. Please be seated. Counsel, before we adjourn for the evening, could you give me an idea of what tomorrow's going to look like?
Tomorrow, Judge, we have our criminal streaking expert, Detective Clint Davis, who will testify right away at 10:30. We also have a scene detective, Toby Myers, and we have a third witness that's escaping me as I stand here.
Alfano.
Oh, Alan Kreidel, who did the handwriting analysis, which ended up being inconclusive either way, from the notepad that was found on scene that was written on by the occupants of the car.
Right. That notepad contains I'm counting the digits, a number that looks like a social security number. Is that a valid social security number for any person in this case?
I don't believe it is, Judge, but I can confirm with my case agent.
If we could confirm that, because if it is, I believe it needs to be redacted before being further published to the jury and or given to them for deliberations.
Or a protective order. I will talk to counsel and we'll come up with a solution to ensure that we are maintaining that.
Thank you. Even if it involved putting a sticky note over it before it was published on the screen?
Thank you.
Okay. And then, other than these three witnesses, do you have any other witnesses tomorrow?
No, Judge, the first witness will be a little more lengthy.
Okay. You anticipate then that these three will take all day?
Yes.
Okay. And then last question, before we adjourn for the evening, is there anything else you would like to address?
No, Judge, I didn't know if you heard back from the representative from the media regarding the court's orders, if you wanted us to come early Thursday morning or anything.
I have shared with the agent for the media the orders, and he has agreed to comply with those. I have not seen the minute entry, but I believe the minute entry went out.
Yes.
Regarding those two issues, and that copies have been provided, but I will follow up with my staff to make absolutely sure that the media agency was emailed a copy of that court order so that they have it in case there are any questions. Why don't you come, say, at 10:20, just in case? But I don't believe there are going to be any issues.
Thank you.
Nothing from us.
All right, thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 10:20.